right, so I'd like to first begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Turrbal and Yagara people who were the traditional custodians of the land around Brisbane. So I'm going to talk about something completely different for me today. I'm an arachnologist by trade, but the pandemic changed everyone's plans, as we saw with Pedro's work. And I ended up doing a methodological study while I was locked out of the museum in Argentina. So I'm going to talk about that today. And I did that with colleagues from Argentina and North America. So most people here will know what ancestral state reconstruction is, but just in case anyone doesn't, ancestral state reconstruction, we take a phylogeny, so relationships between species. We then score some particular trait of interest for all of the tips in that phylogeny, which may be extant taxa or they may be fossils. And then using models and assumptions about evolution, we try and infer the states present in the ancestors. And you can see a nice spider-related ancestral state reconstruction there on the right, looking at the evolution of the respiratory system in spiders. So traditionally, parsimony was used to do ancestral state reconstruction. These methods basically considered every change of state as a penalty of one step and tried to find the order of changes on the tree that leads to the data we see in the tips with the fewest possible changes, the fewest steps. Some of the drawbacks of that method is it doesn't take into account branch lengths. So a change on a short branch and a long branch are weighted equally. And also you might recover more than one most parsimonious tree, and then you have to use some external evidence to try and figure out which one you believe. Whereas newer methods, sort of model-based methods, like maximum likelihood methods, these use an underlying continuous time Markov model and maximum likelihood or some other criterion to identify the rates that maximize the likelihood over the tree. And these do take into account branch length information. They also return you what's called a marginal reconstruction, where you have, like what we can see on the right here, where you have at each node a pie chart, which tells you basically the proportion of the total likelihood score contributed by reconstructions with a particular state. So it might be 75% one state, 25% another. So it gives you an idea of the uncertainty around that as well. So once you're using these methods that incorporate branch length, you then need to ask yourself, well, which branch lengths do I want to use? Most of us as researchers have at our disposal a phylogram where branch length represents the amount of evolutionary change, maybe of nuclear data or maybe of morphology, and a chronogram where branch length represents time. So you can use either of these to do an ancestral state reconstruction. But which one should you use? So mostly chronograms are used for ancestral state reconstruction, and that's probably, well, it could be because people don't believe that the rate of change in a morphological character is likely to be correlated with molecular change, or it could be that it's easier to interpret a reconstruction when the branches just represent time rather than an interplay of time and evolutionary rate like we see in a phylogram. But the reality is that we know that in some cases, molecular data and morphological data can be correlated. The rate of change in them can be correlated. And there are actually specific cases where it's been shown that reconstructions done on a phylogram, in this particular case, reconstructions of body size on a morphological phylogram resulted in more accurate reconstructions than that done on a chronogram. So when we know that there's these two options of a phylogram and a chronogram to do your reconstruction, the next question is, does it really matter? Or will I get the same result no matter what I use? And secondly, is there any way to choose between my chronogram and my phylogram, which one I should use for a reconstruction? There was a study in 2012 where they showed, where they used simulations to show that, in fact, it does matter which you use. If your character is associated with either the chronogram or the phylogram, so it did evolve in correlation with one of those two, the reconstructions on that tree will be more accurate. They also found that phylogenetic signal was positively correlated with reconstruction accuracy. And so what they proposed is that you've got a chronogram and a phylogram. You take your character and you estimate phylogenetic signal using these two metrics, Blomberg's K and Pagel's lambda, on both the chronogram and the phylogram. The one that returns you the highest phylogenetic signal value is the one you should use for your ancestral state reconstruction, because it's more likely to give you an accurate result, a more accurate result. But this was on continuous characters. And we know that we model the evolution of continuous characters very differently to discrete characters. And so the aim of my study was basically to mirror that study and look at whether ancestral state reconstructions of discrete characters, presence, absence, or characters with a set of, a few different states, whether those characters are more accurate on the tree that they evolved on, whether branch length matters, and if there's a way to identify which set of branches, say a phylogram or chronogram, you should use. So I'll quickly go through the methodology. Basically, it's a simulation study, and we did all of this in R. So we generated 5,000 ultrametric trees. We then transformed those ultrametric trees into phylograms by basically performing a branch length transformation to mimic gradual changes in evolutionary rate across the tree. We then simulated a binary character, so a discrete character with two states, on one of the two trees, either the chronogram or the phylogram, performed ancestral state reconstructions using typical maximum likelihood methods on both trees, so both of the two options, one of which was the correct tree and one of which wasn't, to look at whether it made a difference, to look at whether the reconstructions were more accurate if performed on the tree that a character evolved on. And then we generated a whole bunch of test statistics to look at if any of those statistics indicated which tree was the correct underlying tree. So I'll quickly whiz through the results. I know I don't have too long. So basically, we found similar results to Litzius, their analysis on continuous characters. We found that reconstructions were more accurate when conducted on the tree that a character evolved on. So what you can see in the figure, it's a bit complex, but what you need to focus on is that most of the dots in both graphs are below 0, and that means that error decreases on the correct tree, on the tree that the character was actually simulated on. So it does make a difference. Then we tested a bunch of test statistics to see if any of them could be used to choose the correct underlying tree for a character. We found that the first three, which are all phylogenetic signal statistics, either didn't have any utility for choosing the correct underlying tree, or this one that does have utility, which is a new phylogenetic statistic called delta, it did have some utility, but it also showed a systematic bias where it would, all other things being equal, always choose one tree over the other. I think it was the phylogram. But we found that actually the classic model testing statistics like AICC were generally showed better model fit on the tree with the branch lengths that actually underlied the character's evolution. So that showed some promise in selecting the correct tree. So to quickly wrap up, what we found was that unlike in continuous characters, phylogenetic signal stats were not very good for choosing the correct branch lengths to use for ancestral state reconstruction. But we found that model fit statistics like AICC did show promise. So what you can do your analysis on both the chronogram, the phylogram, look at the AICC scores that you get from them. The one that has better model fit is the one that you should use. That's most likely to give you a more accurate reconstruction. So with that, I'm going to finish, and I'm just going to say thank you to the arachnological group in Argentina. I had a fantastic time over there. That was where I did this study. And also to my Australian colleagues who've supported me through my whole career. And finally, to all the conference organisers. It seems like I've done one of these conferences myself, and it comes with its own set of unique challenges, but you guys have done a fantastic job. So thank you. And I'm ready to take questions. Let me just see.
There's a couple in the chat, Jeremy.
Would you mind reading them out? I'm going to leave my screen.
Kenny asks, what software did you use to do the statistic test?
I did the entire analysis in R. I did the statistical tests we used were non-parametric significance tests, Wilcoxon tests, I think they were. I did this study a few months back, so I can't remember the exact tests we used for all the different stages, but I can find it all in the script. So if anyone wants to know, just send me a message and I'll send you through the scripts. Oh, well, once it's published, I'll send through the scripts.
Which actually kind of answers James Dory's question, which is, have you got a crisp publication from this work out yet? I'd love to have a read.
It's in review. It's in review. So we're making a few changes and hopefully it'll be out relatively soon. Thanks. Thanks so much, guys. I'll stop sharing. How are we going for time? All right, we're on time. So we'll go to the next presentation. Who we got up?